welcome to the Executive Insights series in association with KPMG, where we speak to business leaders about their insights into strategy, success and overcoming challenges. I'm Alan Bromell, partner and head of private enterprise at KPMG in Ireland. Today I'm joined by John Goulding, CEO and founder of Workvivo, which is a HR technology company founded in 2017 by John and CTO Joe Lennon. Its offering improves the experience of employees across the business spectrum. John was recently named Business Person of the Month, June 2022, by Business and Finance. John, welcome and thanks for coming in. If you don't mind, I'm gonna start with a question around kind of self-assessment. You won the June 2022 award. No mean accolade. Clearly, you're doing some very good things with the company. What, to your mind, are the core ingredients contributing to your success and that of the company? Standing behind you.
Great. No, thanks, Alan, and thanks for the invite to be here today. And thanks to Business and Finance for the award, which I'm delighted to accept on behalf of the company. For us, it's been a great couple of years. I suppose the last couple of years with COVID has probably it's been good for us essentially, right? So employee communications has become a lot more critical, and we've been right at the heart of it. But for me, I suppose when I think about the ingredients and what has made us successful over the last couple of years, obviously we've built a great product. The market has been really good to us. But the one thing I suppose I'm most proud of is the culture we've built in the company. We've built a culture where we take what we do very, very seriously, but we definitely don't take ourselves too seriously. And we've built a team of people that customers like dealing with. There's a lovely culture where you can bring your whole self to work, and we're not losing any employees. People are staying with us for the journey, and that's something we're really happy with. And I think we've also created a culture where creativity is really blossoming, and I think in today's market it's something we really value, creativity, and I think our culture is fostering a lot of creativity, and I think it's been a competitive advantage for us.
Excellent. I suppose you're newsworthy, John. A lot of people will know the name Workvivo on foot of headlines around fundraisings, one in 2020, one in 2022. I think the company has raised $38 million in two fundraisings from venture capital investors like Tiger Global, Frontline Ventures, and I know Enterprise Ireland were in there at an early stage as well. How did you find that fundraising process? You're probably no stranger to due diligence after that. Yeah.
Due diligence is the part we don't look forward to. But to be fair, the fundraising process for us was a fairly straightforward process. I think Joe Lennon, my co-founder, and myself have always had an approach to fundraising where we've always felt strongly that some companies over-focus on the fundraising process, and I suppose we've observed some startups get caught up in everything being about a fundraising process, whereas for us, from the start, we've always been just very focused on building a great product, winning customers, looking after those customers, evolving the product. And I think for us, we've always felt if you focus on doing those things, which are the right things, the fundraising process tends to take care of itself. So when we got to a point where we were interested in fundraising, we actually had a lot of interest in the company based on, I guess, our execution had been good. And we were lucky enough, Enterprise Ireland came on board very early. We came to the attention of Eric Yuan from Zoom, who became one of our original seed investors. Frontline have been a great supporter from the start. And Tiger Global, who I guess everybody knows Tiger Global at this stage, right? But yeah. Tiger Global came on very early in our journey as well. And but the whole process was not hugely arduous, but I think it was based on the position we had put ourselves in.
Yeah, I mean, what you've said there, a lot of it is consistent with what you described as core ingredient around having fun, culture, and everything else kind of takes care of itself. When it came to fundraising, you needed to make sure you had a product in the business that someone wanted to invest in, so there's a bit of chicken and egg around that. Something I'm always interested to hear from entrepreneurs like yourself is, how you determined whether or not you were going to take in investors and what was the right time for that. Some people will say, well, look, I've worked hard to build this company, I'm not giving any of it up, right? Because that's what they associate with a fundraising process. So where was your head at, and that of Joe's when it comes to that topic?
It's funny actually, because I think Joe and myself, originally had the thought that we would try and bootstrap, right, win customers and fund our growth based on winning customers. And as we ended up with more success, it just became apparent that the market opportunity was like huge, and we were well placed to capitalize on that. And it would have almost been a shame to move too slowly. Like, we could have continued our growth, and I'm sure we would have had very solid growth over the last number of years. But we decided to go the kind of Silicon Valley traditional route of going for a Series A, going for a Series B. And one of the considerations for us at the time was, look, no matter what, we're signed up for a big adventure here, right? If we sign up for a significant Series A, which is what we achieved, and a significant Series B, we're going to have a great adventure, and we're going to take the company to places that we would never have taken it if we were trying to grow bootstrapped.
Yeah,
and that was probably the biggest thing. So the opportunity was there. We had good conversations with investors. It wasn't an arduous process, and ultimately we signed up for the adventure that going the Series A and Series B route takes you.
Yeah, and of course both A and B happened during COVID. I mean, how do you reflect on that period now when you were running a business, trying to raise funds, all presumably behind a screen? And then how did COVID change the business and how you operate as a leader of that business?
Yeah, I think I mentioned earlier, COVID was good for us, right? I mean, our platform, it's an employee communication platform, but the platform itself is all about helping to shape the culture in the organization. We talk about employee engagement in terms of helping with the employee experience, but we're trying to ultimately help organizations create a greater emotional commitment to the organization. And when COVID hit, I think organizations very quickly came to grips with the transactional communication, right? And what I mean by that is, we were all able to jump on Zoom calls or Microsoft Team calls. We were all able to share documents, and essentially we were able to get work done. But 6 months into it, you started hearing about things like fatigue, retention problems, the Great Resignation, and what became very apparent is organizations were struggling with the how do you shape the culture in the digital world? How do you create a digital heart? How do you replace the kind of things that normally happen in the office? And that's what our platform does. So we were, I suppose, well placed in that regard. The other thing that I suppose was probably an additional bonus, we were typically competing with US competitors based in Silicon Valley. All of a sudden, we were all on Zoom calls. So being in Cork on a Zoom call to the biggest corporations in the world who happened to be in New York or California or whatever, it didn't matter that we were in Cork. They almost didn't know or didn't care we were in Cork. It was we were competing on a level playing field in that regard to our competitors who previously may have had an on-site presence, feet on the street, which put us in a very strong position in terms of being able to be very effective, efficient. We started winning customers like all over the US, Australia, Middle East. We would not have done that as quickly or as efficiently had the whole change not happened, in terms of just
being able to get on planes and
get
into meetings.
We would have been on planes. We would have been spending a lot of time out of the country.
So I mean, look, COVID's a bad thing, but in a lot of ways it kind of helped you along, because there was that point, and also strikes me you had a product that was actually there for the taking the minute organisations start to struggle with that employee engagement and culture issue, which you were ready to grasp, right? Whereas I think a lot of organisations had never even thought about that issue before, because the idea of remote engagement, work and hybrid, all that kind of stuff was just alien to those with an office culture.
Yeah, and I think obviously there's a bit of luck involved as well, or a good bit of luck, right? Like, we had started the fundraising process just before COVID hit. When COVID hit, we had completed on it, so we were well capitalized. COVID hit, and it just plays right into, like, this is exactly what we do, right? If you've got a workforce that's distributed, that's working from home, that's working sometimes in the office, our platform is perfect for that. So there's a lot of luck in that, right? We obviously didn't foresee a pandemic, right?
Yeah. I mean, just sticking with employee engagement for a minute. I mean, you're bound to have strong views given it's your core offering. I mean, in a COVID context, we're focusing on it hugely. KPMG as an organisation, as are others. It's top of the list in terms of priorities in a lot of our organisations now. How do you think things have changed in this area? What are the top things that you're seeing driving employee engagement, either through your platform or otherwise?
Yeah, so I guess the way we think about employee engagement, first of all, is, and I mentioned earlier, it's in terms of, look, what's the output you're looking for, right? So people talk about employee experience, but again, it can't be employee experience, doing things for the sake of it, right? Your intentions in terms of an employee experience strategy have to be grounded in what's the expected outcome, what's the desired outcome. And for us, the desired outcome is that greater emotional commitment to the organization. Because if you have an organization where people are bought into what the organization is doing, what the organization is about, you're much more likely to succeed. People are going to stay, they're going to be more productive, they're going to be bought in. And that's, for us, that's how we think about it. So the things that affect that, we've built into our product. So things like connection with the values of the organization, even communication itself, right? People are much more likely to have a sense of ownership of a company and be engaged if they feel informed. Recognition is huge. It's all the research shows that if you build that culture of recognition, you're much more likely to have an engaged organization. One thing that's coming through loud and clear as well, and you see all the research over the past year, sense of belonging is coming up again and again. People are looking for a sense of belonging in a company, and we were chatting earlier before this conversation, and we were talking about like communities and how do you facilitate the natural communities that exist in an organization. And the more you can facilitate the natural communities that exist, and some of those communities that exist in an organization could be social communities. It could be a five-a-side soccer club, or it could be a technical community, but the more you facilitate those communities, which are the kind of things we're doing, the more you'll have an engaged organization, the more people are bought in. Some interesting things we've been asked to do over the last year, 2 years, which we wouldn't have expected to have to build into the product. Podcasts, for example. More and more organizations are using podcasts internally. Organizations have been using podcasts externally for quite a while, but now we're starting to observe organizations using them internally. And the whole, I suppose, theory behind it is it's well documented that if a leader sits down with an employee and explains the values of the organization, the purpose of the organization, the ambition for the organization, that individual is going to be infinitely more bought in. But how do you do that if you have an organization of 100 people? How do you do it if you have an organization of 10,000 people? How do you do it if you have an organization of 100,000 people? And podcasts are a very rich and effective way for a leader to have a fireside conversation with somebody, talk about where the company is going, and it becomes a very intimate experience for somebody, an employee who happens to be out walking their dog of an evening, and it's a very effective way at connecting people to what ultimately what the company is trying to achieve at scale.
And unlike the in-person town hall or whatever, if the dog's barking too loud, you can play it again. If it's really good, you want to hear it again and be inspired, you can play it again. So
yeah, and they're the kind of things we're seeing, right? And live streaming, we've built live streaming in because people are used to doing town halls now on Zoom, etc. But we've been asked to build live streaming in because leaders want to do just live stream on some good news, where it's not an overly produced message, it's just an in-the-moment message. People are looking for authenticity, where it's not overly produced, it's just in the moment, this is what's happening.
It's human.
Great news.
Right?
It's very human. Yeah.
So it sounds like a lot of what you're doing with organisations, therefore, is seeking to replace or replicate the experiences that we know were tried and tested in promoting engagement, but we're all in person. So you needed a small organisation and you needed everyone in one place. So it's interesting. It's definitely the way things are going. I'm an accountant, right, John? So I think I get the platform. I certainly get what it's seeking to achieve, but maybe even for listeners and viewers, just to explain maybe a few basic examples, like how does, say, a professional services firm use your platform day in, day out? Like you just simple things that would have been done 10 years ago in the office. How are they using the Workvivo platform for that?
Yeah, so you mentioned professional services. Like we've actually seen like a lot of traction in professional services, hospitality, with hotel groups, retail. We've got airlines on board now. We've got high-tech companies. So it's a broad spectrum of the type of organization that we're working with, universities. Our platform has been described by some as it's almost like a social media platform for inside your business, right? And social media sometimes has connotations, but it's social media in its style, in terms of you have an activity feed, you're being informed and you're engaging with what's in your activity feed. And what could be in your activity feed might be an update from the CEO, it could be an article from part of the business, it could be recognition from one colleague to another that becomes very public. It's within the department, or maybe it's with across the whole company, depending on the size of the company. You typically see updates about the good things that are happening in the organization. And like, just to give you an example, where somebody gives recognition to somebody else about, it might be well done on a project go live, or well done. A lot of the time, the organization isn't as aware as it should be of that initiative in itself.
Yeah.
So it's a double positive, where people are being recognized, but you're also informing people about what's going on in the organization. We also have things like community spaces, where your feed is personal to you. It's depending on what part of the business you're in, what community spaces you've signed up for. You're going to see information that's personal to you. Plus, you're going to see information from corporate, from exec leadership, etc. That might be in the form of a podcast, a video, an article, anything like that. And it's really, I suppose most people describe it as an employee app, where you can you might be able to access your payslip or your policy information. So it essentially becomes the center of gravity for communication in the organization, center of gravity for what's happening in the organization, not what's happening in the next 15 minutes. Like that's a Slack message, that's a Microsoft Teams message, yeah. But it's what's happening in the company on a broader scale.
Gotcha. Well, you've simplified that for me greatly. A lot of that, there's what it's striving to achieve, because it does resonate with what's going on in our business at the moment. I mean, we've touched on aspects of it already, and I have to ask you, what's your view on where the physical office kind of sits in the new way of working as we go forward now?
Yeah, it's something we're I know it, like we're a couple of years into it now, right? But we actually still have an open mind on where it's going to go, even for ourselves. We're seeing most people work from anywhere, work from home. People have, we've hired a lot of people out in different parts of Ireland, in different parts of Europe, in different parts of the US. And we've been able to do that basically because, we know they can be effective from anywhere. But we are starting to create hubs. So we have a hub now in London, a hub in Boston, a hub in Cork, a hub in Dublin. And the reason we're creating those hubs is we do feel it's really important that people get together every so often. And for me, I spend a good bit of time in the office, and a lot of the time I'm deciding the night before or the morning of whether I go into the office or not. And I think there's an energy that comes from being in the office. And I spoke about the culture earlier. Like, I love the people I work with. I love bumping into them, and it's things like what we call spontaneous collisions, right? Mm. That's how do you recreate that, and it's something we're putting a little bit of thought into at the moment. How do you recreate that in the digital world? Because if I'm going into the office for a pre-planned meeting and I'm meeting these people, I know I'm going to meet them. A lot of the energy that comes from going into the office is not from that meeting, but it's from the person you bumped into that you didn't know was going to be in the office that day, and you end up having a conversation that you didn't expect to have. And that's something we're trying to facilitate in the digital world as well. So, but I think the jury's out. There's a lot of energy that comes from the office, but I think we're gone past the point of no return in terms of, look, it's never going to be the same again. So I think, we need to plan for people not being in the office most of the time or a lot of the time. But I think the office still has a part to play. Yeah,
fully agree. On office, obviously Workvivo's HQ is in Cork. Can you tell us a little bit more about the attraction of not just Cork but the regions outside Dublin as a place to build a business. Have you found it has made a difference at all? And is there anything that needs to be done, I suppose, from a policy perspective, or Ireland Inc. looking at it, that will empower the regions further? Because I do think they have a big part to play, and clearly your success story is testament to the fact that it can be done.
Yeah, I think, like, for me, I think Cork people will always try and anchor around Cork, right? Centre of the universe in our minds, right? But no, for us, Cork has provided the recipe for us to be successful, right? It's provided a number of things that we've, I suppose, been the beneficiaries of, in terms of the IDA have done a great job over the last number of decades in bringing really impressive businesses into Cork and into Ireland, but Cork has done really well. And I think what those, a lot of the time it's multinationals, what those multinationals have done, they've trained us. So I was the beneficiary of 13 years in EMC, had a great time there, but I also learned what good looks like in terms of different parts of the business.
Yep.
And I think a lot of people that are working for multinationals do get to see what good looks like, build up great experience. And if you combine that then with, there's a nice startup ecosystem in Cork, teamwork, we have led the way there over the last number of years. And you get to see that, okay, it can be done from Cork, or can be done from anywhere, right? And even we were talking about the fundraising process earlier. So our main investor was Tiger Global, who are in New York. And I think traditionally Irish startups would have just looked at the Irish investment scene, whereas now, whether you're based in Cork or Mayo or anywhere, you can attract the attention of big US investors, which I think is a major advantage as well. And we've had massive support from the likes of Enterprise Ireland from day one on our growth. They've helped us from our initial stages right up until over the last month. They've helped us secure some deals in the Middle East. So we've had a lot of support, and for me, Cork has been a great part of it for us. We've had huge support. We've also had huge support from customers, organizations that became customers. I think when there's multinationals in an area, if you're in that area, you typically have access to them. And we've ended up talking to the likes of Arlo Technologies, Netgear in Cork, and they've ended up becoming global customers. So, but that has been true. I suppose that's been facilitated by an introduction in Cork.
Yeah, and it's the same in a lot of businesses. Their own is no different to your clients or your customers, or your best marketing tool if you're doing your core job correctly, right? Yeah. I suppose as a small startup, what struck me in learning about your story and chatting earlier, John, you won some pretty large blue chip accounts fairly early on as a small startup in this dot on the western side of Europe, right? So just talk a little bit about that in terms of, if I'm one of those large multinationals, right, giving you business, I'm probably weighing you up against a bigger competitor and saying, I really like these guys, but they haven't done this before. It's a big gamble. Mm-hmm. Saying, you haven't done this before, we can't give you the business, we'd love to. And you're saying, well, it's that chicken and egg. Somebody has to give us a shot so that we can show that we've done it for one of the big boys, right? So how did that play out? Was it down to personal touch, trust?
I think it's a number of things. One of the things we've always, I think, done pretty well is we've always acted like a bigger company. So even when it was just Joe and myself, if you met us, you would have thought we had 50 people in the company. And I think, how that was represented was in any interactions with customers, the collateral we gave customers, the follow-up, every interaction was just, I suppose, at a certain level. And any output in terms of things we did in the product, we were very self-critical in terms of, we thought of ourselves as a bigger company. So we didn't give ourselves excuses to be anything less than what our big global competitors were able to do. And I think that played out well, and I think you almost have to think about yourself as a bigger company, and you end up acting like that and growing into that. There was one example when we'd 5 people in the company, and we competed for an opportunity with one of the largest technology firms in the world. They've like 50,000 employees. We had 5 people in our company. We ended up getting to the last 6 in that competition. We ended up getting to the last 4. We ended up getting to the last 2. And when we got to the last 2, it was Facebook we were up against, right? Huge corporation. They've got a solution for the workplace called Workplace. So we were up against them, and we ended up being invited to California for several like demos, workshops, a bake-off essentially. And I remember one particular meeting where the response to our product was really, really good, but the customer highlighted some gaps that we had, and we left California on a Thursday, and on the Friday we sent a video back to the customer saying, great to meet you yesterday, or the prospect, great to meet you yesterday, we're back in Ireland, just to let you know, you raised this thing yesterday. Overnight, we've been able to do some software development. We've got that done. We're going to work through the weekend to get this one done. By Tuesday, you're going to have 7 of the 10 items completed. And I think that responsiveness and that speed was really appreciated. And ultimately, it ended up with that 50,000 person organization placing their trust in a 5-person organization from Ireland. And I think once you get that, gave us credibility. Then we bounced on from there. We hired great people to be able to support that customer, and it gave us the credibility to go for the next one, because we were able to point back to this one, we were able to point to success, we were able to point to a great relationship, and I think that's the way it worked for us.
Of course, it's key that as you build on that success and you become bigger yourselves, you remember those war stories, and remember that's a key part of your culture and continue to be what made you successful in the first place. John, probably one I should have started with earlier, because it goes back a few years in terms of your career, but what always impresses me when speaking to entrepreneurs like yourself is the risk-taking dimension, right? The fact that after 13 years in EMC, and I think you were in another organisation after that, you said, you know what, I'm going to give up that security of the monthly paycheck or the money landing in the bank account, and I'm going to go and try and do something different and do it my way and something that's mine. With Joe, obviously, who you knew, I think, from the organisation you were in at the time. Just what was the mindset around that time, and was there an element of bravery that you look back on with some pride there?
Yeah, I wouldn't call it bravery. I think instinctively it felt like the right thing to do, and I heard a great talk by somebody one time that was talking about instinct, right? And instinct is the collection of all your life experiences, right? It's your brain processing all the experiences you've have, and I suppose suggesting that this is a good idea. And to me, it felt like the right thing to do at the time. I had spent 13 years in EMC, learned a huge amount there. I spent 10 years in a company called Core HR. I was Chief Operating Officer. I became CEO, and that was a fantastic company where it was a small, like infinitely smaller than EMC, but I suppose my experience ended up being across the business, and learned enough that I felt, okay, I could do this, to the extent that when Joe and I got together, we decided to start a business and to start a software company before we knew what we were going to build. So we committed, we established the company, we found offices, it was just the two of us, and we were coming to work not knowing what we were going to build. But we knew, we had certain things we knew. We knew it was going to be in the greater HR space. That was our background. For me, I've described Joe as a once-in-a-generation technology guy, and I had confidence in Joe that no matter whatever we decide to do, we're going to make a go of it. One of the criteria we had for ourselves was that there had to be competition. So we were not going to jump into a market that didn't have competition, because if there's competition, it means that there is a market, right? And I guess we were just backing ourselves that if we jump into a market, we're going to do something better or different, and we're going to do it either different enough or better enough that we're going to make a go of it. I think the element of bravery, I really don't think there, for me, I don't think there was. I think it was, look, I had a lot of faith in Joe, and I have very different skills, and I thought, okay, this, felt like we could really make a go of something here. And then there's I think once you publicly declare that you're doing something, then your fear of failure just kicks in, right? And you just double down on doing all the right things to make it successful.
And avoid going back at all costs.
Yeah, it's a very public thing to do. If you start a company, people know you've started a company, and you don't want to be going back in 6 or 12 months saying, look, we tried it. And that's like, there's nothing wrong with that either, right? But I think inherently, we have this fear of failure that drives us to ensure that it's successful.
John, you've raised funds, you've great investors on board, you have a great product, and that's at a time when organisations are more focused on employee engagement than ever. There's lots of other things going on in the world, clearly. So what's next on the horizon for Workvivo?
It's funny, right? We've grown well over 100% every year since we started. We'll grow well over 100% again this year. So growth is, we're enjoying the growth. We're enjoying the journey. People ask us, where do we want to take it? And what we like to talk about is realizing our potential. What we don't like to talk about is, some companies have these targets that they set for themselves where, hey, we're going to go public by 2025, and while that may happen, and hopefully something like that happens, it's not the ambition that drives us. The ambition that drives us is to realize our potential, and the market opportunity that exists it's phenomenal, and the team that we've assembled is phenomenal. Anytime we're adding a new great person to the team, it just feels like the potential is growing and growing. And I think for us, it's let's realize our potential. Our potential just feels like, look, we could be one of the leading technology players. So when you mentioned Zoom, you mentioned Slack, we'd like to be in that bracket. And I think we've made a really good start. But again, success for us is if we realize our potential. Excellent.
Well, best of luck as you embark on that. Thanks a million for coming in today. Lots of learnings for me. Hopefully viewers will enjoy it, and best of luck, John. Thanks.
Thanks, Alan. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for joining us today for Executive Insights in association with KPMG.